Noswaith dda. Good evening. My name is David William, and I'm the curator of historic buildings at St Fagans. This talk should last about 20 minutes, and there'll be an opportunity for questions at the end, if you just use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. This evening, I would like to discuss one of my favourite buildings at St Fagans, an early farmhouse from the uplands of Llansanfraid, Cwm Deitur, not far from Rhaeadr in Powys. Its name is Cilewent, which is a shortened version of Encil Ewent. Ewent is a Christian name, and the house then bears the name Ewent's Retreat. The image in front of us shows the building in its original location. This was the 7th building to be dismantled and re-erected at St Fagans, and it was opened to the public in 1959. The museum acquired this building as it was a rare survivor. It was subsequently listed Grade 2 by Cadw. And here is the building in its new home within the walls of the museum. What we see in front of us is known as a longhouse, sometimes referred to as a Welsh longhouse. This form of house is actually common across much of Europe, and some are recorded in England from the 13th century. The reason these houses are considered long is that they're composed of 2 parts, both sharing the same roof and the same entrance. One part was for the owners or tenants of the property, while the second was for their cattle. The earliest record of this type of building comes from the Mabinogi, which are medieval prose stories written in Welsh between the 12th and 13th centuries. One of these stories, Breuddwyd Rhonabwy, The Dream of Rhonabwy, includes a detailed description of the Hall of Heilyn Goch. It states that after entering the building, the visitors had to walk through animal manure in order to reach Heilyn's smoky hall. Hence, overwintering cattle is clearly a very old tradition. Traditionally, cattle would be kept indoors between the 1st of November until the end of March. Cattle can be kept outdoors over winter, but their hooves would quickly turn the fields into mud, which would hinder the growth of crops and grass in the spring. In 1940, in his book, The Welsh House, Iorwerth Peat described the longhouse as the typical Welsh house, and he saw it as a type of house that had been present since prehistory. 8 years later, with the opening of St Fagans, Peat became its first head. It was he who first used the term longhouse to describe this type of house in Wales. This was as a result of hearing the occupants of these houses describing them as long houses in their native tongue while he was undertaking his research. Later research, however, most notably by Sir Cyril Fox and Peter Smith, demonstrated that the story of longhouses was far more complicated than previously thought. Sir Cyril Fox showed that most of the surviving longhouses had been built in 2 separate phases, when a cowhouse was added to an existing house, and a longhouse, in many cases, was simply a development of another entirely different form of house. Hence, its roots could not be adequately traced back into prehistory. Equally, Peter Smith demonstrated that from around 1530, Wales had several different types of houses, longhouses being just one of a number that could be called typical. Our collection of historical buildings highlight these different types of houses, which are known collectively as examples of vernacular architecture. That is, buildings built out of local materials by local people to suit the local environment. For example, in Snowdonia, we see two-story stone-built houses with slate roofs and tall chimneys at either end. The image top left shows one of these houses, a garreg fawr, built in 1544. Along the heavily wooded eastern border, timber-framed buildings were common. And on the top right, we see Abernodydd farmhouse, built in 1678. And in the south, Glamorganshire in particular, we see two-story stone-built houses with thatched roofs. This one at the bottom is called Kenixton and was built from 1610. In mid-Wales, long houses like Cilewent remained common until the early 18th century, and, judging by the Dream of Rhonabwy, were likely a continuation of a much older type of house common throughout much of Wales prior to the advent of these new types of houses. Cilewent is the earliest house in our collection. It was scientifically dated using dendrochronological analysis, which returned a likely construction date of 1470. Dendrochronology is the study of tree rings, and samples were taken from the large cruck trusses that hold the roof. Here they are in these images from the rebuilding of Cilewent in the 1950s. Crucks are curved oak beams that were jointed at the top to form the capital letter A. Several pairs of crucks were connected to each other by horizontal purlins, and together they took the weight of the roof. In this image, we see another of our early houses, Hendra Rowydd Uchaf, which was built in 1508 in Llangenhafal, Denbighshire. Although this building is also long and also housed cattle at its far end, it's not classed as a longhouse, as people and cattle entered through separate doorways. Nevertheless, this is probably what Cilewent would have looked like when it was first built. This is a 5-bay hall house. 2 bays were for the animals, while the remaining 3 were for its owners or tenants. The animals were kept to the left of the doorway you see in the image, while to the right were 2 rooms used as a workroom and a kitchen cum living room, respectively, with a bedroom beyond. This single-story building was heated by an open fire, which would have filled the roof space with smoke. As you can see, the walls are timber framed with wattle and daub infill panels and a roof thatched with straw. All that remains of the original Cilewent is the 2 cruck trusses and a timber frame partition between the dwelling and the cowhouse. Along with a single entrance shared by both cattle and humans, another key characteristic of longhouses is that they were built into the slope of a hill. Modern houses are generally built perpendicular to any slope. A step up from the cowhouse and into the hall was common, and this prevented muck spreading into the house from the shared entrance. These doorways were wider than modern doorways, as once inside, the cattle had to turn to enter their cowhouse. The passage where this occurred is known as a cross passage, and they nearly always have a doorway at either end. One from the yard into the house, and another from the house into the field behind. In this image, we look from the hall of Cilewent towards the cowhouse. Just beyond, we can see the head of a cow in a stall. It was a common belief across Europe that cows would produce more milk if they could see the flames of the fire. Carved into the lintel of the doorway into the cross passage is the date 1734, accompanied by the initials SPE and EEH. The owners of the initials are unknown, as is much of Cilewent's early history. The date could signify a marriage, but its prominent position on the outside of the building, coupled with a period of change common to many houses at this time, suggests that this date is right for the rebuilding. By this time, the house was 250 years old, and it is likely that the crux at either end of the building, along with its timber walls, needed replacing. As the cruck frames take the weight of the roof, walls can be pulled down and replaced fairly easily. This time, the walls were built in stone, and slates replaced the earlier thatch. In this plan of the building, looking left to right and downslope to upslope, we see a doorway to the stables, which had room for 2 horses. Then we have the cow house, which had room for 12 cows, 6 facing the stable and 6 facing the hall. In here, the floor is of pitch stone cobbles to provide the cattle with a little more grip. Next is the cross passage and the front door to the building. It seems during the rebuilding in 1734, it was decided that an opposing doorway, that is a back door, was no longer required. After the cross passage is the hall, or living quarters, with its large inglenook fireplace. This is another departure from the expected characteristics of a longhouse. Generally, the chimney would poke through the roof at a central point along the building's length. There are 2 reasons for such a position, and they relate to the age of the building. Surviving longhouses tend to be late examples, where the building was extended over time. Hence, if the building had a chimney at one gable and an extension was added to that end, the chimney would appear centrally placed in relation to the building's new length. However, if a building was an early example and had been built as a longhouse from the outset, its original central open hearth, as seen at Hendra Row Iddichaf, were often encased in a chimney where it was, leading to its central position. Cilewent is an early example, and it seems that in this case, while it was being rebuilt, its owners decided to build a chimney not where the hearth had been originally, but on the end gable wall. Another choice made at this time was to extend the original rectangular building to the west to include a dairy. This cutaway drawing shows the hall at the far end, screened by its oak partition wall. The 2 cruck frames holding the roof are to be seen, and a rudimentary loft above the cow house where hay for their feed was stored. It was up here that the male farmhands would sleep, keeping warm from the heat of the cattle below. There is nothing quite like a photograph to take you back in time. And here we see the Jones family outside of their home around 1899. They farmed Cilewent from the 1870s and were the last of a long line to work the land here. In the image, moving left to right, we see a visitor named John Scott. Then Elizabeth Jones and her brother Evan, their grandmother Mary Williams, their mother Margaret Jones, and a brother called Thomas. From the 18th century, sheep were kept along with cattle. The cattle could provide milk, which could then be processed in the dairy to become butter and cheese, which was an important source of income for the family. The sheep provided the wool for the clothes and blankets to keep away the cold. The large yard in front of the house was used to corral sheep ready for washing and shearing. Due to Wales's damp climate, oats were their staple crop, and most meals comprised oats and milk in some form. For example, oat cakes cooked on a bake stone over the fire. In this image, we see an arc-lid chest in the cross passage, which was used for storing milled oats. Once the oats were milled, the chest was filled with the aid of children in clean socks, who stood inside the chest to trample the contents down and pack it tightly. Its curved lid could be turned upside down and used to transport the contents. On the left of the chest is the low partition wall of the cowhouse. The black and white image shows the cowhouse with its pitched stone floor and cattle bays. Inside the dairy is a box churn, which was used for turning cream into butter. The handle, when turned vigorously, revolves the four-bladed paddle inside, which churns the cream. On the right is a large cheese press, cleverly made to look like a piece of household furniture. The ropes hold a wooden basket filled with stones, which was raised using the windlass and lowered onto milk curd wrapped in muslin to produce cheese. A more detailed look at the dairy reveals some key features that highlight the belief of the occupants during this period. Upon closer inspection, numerous small burn marks are visible on the mantle above the dairy fireplace. When marks like these were first recorded, it was thought that these burns were the result of accidental damage, when a badly placed candle burned a nearby wooden object, or the result of cleaning a red-hot poker ready to mull wine. However, after renewed academic interest around 20 years ago, it was noted that such an explanation could not reasonably explain the evidence. Where burns were found in places where a candlestick wouldn't be placed, such as on the back of a door, high up on a roof truss, or low down on stair treads. These marks were created deliberately by lit tapers, which were an early form of candle, and are common throughout Britain from the end of the medieval period. The act of burning is thought to have protected the house and occupants from all kinds of problems, such as fire, evil spirits, and bad luck. The unusually large number of burn marks at Cilewent suggests that deliberate creation of burns like these was a long-standing tradition. Many signs of superstitious belief are found throughout our collection of historical buildings, and I hope that this will be the subject of my next museum talk. So please do join me then. In this view of the hall, dressed as it would have appeared in the 19th century, we see the heart of the home, where food was prepared and people sat on the settle next to the fire to keep warm. And two beautiful stick chairs are visible. This one was made around the middle of the 18th century in Machynlleth and features a backrest of a single curving branch of oak. It is said that it belonged to the Reverend Daniel Rowland of Llangeitho, who was a leading figure of the Methodist revival in Wales. Another crucial item of furniture at this time was the cwpwrdd daearn, or two-piece cupboard. Plates, cutlery, valuables, and documents were all stored in these early forerunners of the traditional Welsh dresser. When more storage was required, these two-piece cupboards were heightened to become a cwpwrdd trydarn, or three-piece cupboard, and Cilewent features one of each. During the late 1880s, the city of Birmingham realised it would not have enough fresh water for its growing population. And in 1892, the Birmingham Corporation acquired land through compulsory purchase orders in the Cilewent and Elan valleys to build dams. 3 were built between 1893 and 1904. Although the Cilewent Dam, built in 1951, came very close to Cilewent, the proposed dam at this site was never built. By the 1950s, Cilewent was 500 years old, and it was deemed no longer fit for purpose by its new owners, the Birmingham Corporation, and a bungalow was built for the tenants. Cilewent was donated to the museum and opened to the public in 1959. Well, that brings me to the end of this evening's talk. Thank you very much for listening. I now have some time to answer a few of your questions. While we wait for some questions to appear, just to remind you that the next talk is about Christmas traditions, and that will be obviously in the next few weeks. Well, I have no questions in my question box, so hopefully you can all hear me. Oh, I've got a question now. Is it the case that often the cow house had a roof slightly lower than the human's house? More often than not, yes. It's very complicated with longhouses because over time, the farmhouse itself could have been made taller, as was often the case. Cottages were often quite low buildings, and they didn't have a full first floor. So then you get an awkward situation where the cow house and the farmhouse are rebuilt at different occasions. So it's quite often hard to phase a building because they've changed over time. But quite often the cow house is lower than the farmhouse because the cows don't need as much room, basically. Can you shed any light on the origin of the name Cilewent? Well, Encil means retreat, and Ewent was a Christian name, so Ewent's Retreat is the name of the building. And a really nice message here. My grandmother was Elizabeth Jones, the young girl in the doorway. It's really nice to hear that. Can you repeat how the cheese was made, please? Well, I'm no expert at that. But within the dairy are an assortment of equipment to produce cheese. This includes the cheese press. It includes a big copper table used for separating the curds and whey. It includes a large pine table and then a special shelf for drying or curing the cheese after the curds were pressed in the cheese press I showed you earlier. Another question, how does the museum find these images of the buildings? When we get offered a building and we have to research it thoroughly. So our first port of call usually is county archives, and the Royal Commission on Ancient and Historic Monuments Wales, and any archival establishment. But the more research, the more people we contact, the more that family members send in images they have of these properties. So slowly over time, we can build a really nice idea of how the building looked through different time periods. Another question, did you say they were generally built against a slope? Yes, they were built into a slope. That's because the mucky end, where the cows were at the downslope end, where the end of the building was, so they could clear the cow house of the manure and throw it downslope or wheelbarrow it downslope away from the building. And many houses, early houses, are identifiable because they're built into the slope rather than against it, as we do now. Did you uncover any other apotropaic marks in addition to the burn marks while rebuilding Cilewent? We didn't in this building. There are many apotropaic marks which tend to be engraved patterns, if you like, on buildings. There are many throughout our collection of historic buildings, but also there's different kinds of protective marks or behaviors, if you like. And one of our farmhouses, Kenixton, which I showed you earlier, is painted red, and that was thought to ward off evil spirits as well. Equally, there's some carved figurines within the door of Cilewent farmhouse, and they're there to protect the entrance. In the same way, our ironworkers' cottages, Rhyd y Car, many of them have got highly polished brassware around the fireplace. And that's also there to protect the house, because the belief was the devil doesn't like to see his reflection. So shiny objects were often utilized in that sense. Back, here's another question. I know the house as Cilewent, which I thought was cold wind in a gap. Is that just apocryphal, or is it the usual case of places having varied spelling? That's a really good question. Some people do know Cilewent as Cilewent, but I think that was a slightly later name, and it wasn't called that, certainly during our interpretation period, say the 18th century or earlier. It was, so you're correct, it was known as Cilewent, which does mean the retreat of the cold wind. But I think it was only known as that for a short period. How often is Cilewent open? It was closed on Monday when I visited in October. Some of our buildings are closed occasionally so they can be cleaned. Many of them were put into hibernation over lockdown over the last couple of years. So they've needed quite a substantial amount of cleaning to get them back up to standard, if you like. Another question, was it only dairy cattle that were bought inside? I think so. In this case, I think they only had dairy cattle. That was their main source of income. All cattle tend to be brought inside, but I think dairy cattle need to be kept close at hand and warm. All right. Wow. Thank you very much for your kind words and your comments. There's one more. Does kill in the name Cilewent suggest an early medieval site? Does it come from the Irish kill, K-I-L? I would suggest that they've got a similar root, a similar linguistic root, and that they come from the same place, because Irish and Welsh are very similar in their origins, if you like, both Celtic languages. Okay, well, thank you very much. Please do join me again. The next talk is about Christmas traditions, and that should be in the next couple of weeks. So, diolch yn fawr, and start.